Riley Vaughn had worked for Carter Nichols for 3 years, and in all that time, she had never once imagined he would look at her the way he was looking at her now. The evening had started like any other Friday at Nichols Maritime Solutions. The shipping company Carter had built from the ground up into a billion-dollar empire. Riley had been gathering her things, ready to head home after a particularly grueling week of contract negotiations with suppliers in Singapore. She had just powered down her computer when Carter appeared in her office doorway, his tall frame filling the space, his dark hair slightly disheveled from what she knew had been his habit of running his hands through it when he was thinking hard about something. "Riley, do you have a minute?" His voice carried that low rumble that always made something flutter in her chest, though she had trained herself over the years to ignore it. "Of course, Mr. Nichols." She set her bag down, smoothing her skirt as she straightened. "Is there something urgent with the Singapore deal?" He stepped into her office, closing the door behind him. That was unusual. In 3 years, Carter had never closed her office door. He was always careful about appearances, about maintaining the professional boundary between a CEO and his chief operations officer. It was one of the things she respected about him, even as it sometimes made her heart ache with wishes she would never voice. "This has nothing to do with work," he said, and for the first time since she had known him, Carter looked uncertain. His hands went into his pockets, then came out again. He crossed to the window that overlooked the Seattle harbor, watching the ferries moving across the darkening water. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Riley felt her pulse quicken. "Okay. Do you ever think about me?" He turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "Outside of work, I mean. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if things were different between us?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth, then closed it, searching for words that wouldn't reveal too much but wouldn't be a lie. Carter had always valued honesty above everything else. "I think that would be inappropriate," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked." He moved closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something woodsy and clean that she had committed to memory without meaning to. "I asked if you think about it, not whether you think you should." Riley swallowed hard. Her job, her career, her carefully constructed professional reputation, all of it could crumble with the wrong words right now. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there that he never showed in board meetings or negotiations, she found she could not lie to him. "Yes," she whispered. "I think about it." The tension in his shoulders eased, and something like relief flooded his features. "I've been trying not to for 3 years. I told myself it was wrong that you worked for me, that it would complicate everything. But Riley, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot sit in meetings with you and pretend that all I see is my COO. I cannot watch you laugh with other people and not wish I was the one making you smile. I cannot keep lying to myself that what I feel for you is merely professional respect." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Carter, let me finish, please." He took another step closer, close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why we should not do this, but I also know that I have never met anyone like you. You are brilliant and kind and fierce, and when you walk into a room, everything else fades away. So I am asking you, Riley Vaughn, if you would consider giving me a chance. Not as your boss, but as a man who has fallen completely in love with you." The words seemed to hang in the air between them, impossible and perfect. Riley felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had imagined this moment in 100 different ways, late at night when she could not sleep, but she had never truly believed it would happen. "I could fire you right now," he said quickly, misreading her silence. "That way there would be no ethical concerns. You would have the most generous severance package in corporate history and glowing references. And stop," she said, laughing despite the tears that were now sliding down her cheeks. "Stop talking about firing me." Then what? She kissed him. It was not something she planned, not something she had thought through. She simply reached up, grabbed the front of his shirt, and pulled him down to her. His surprise lasted only a moment before his arms came around her, lifting her off her feet as he kissed her back with an intensity that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Carter rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to take that as a yes." "That is a yes," she confirmed, her fingers still clutching his shirt. "But I am not letting you fire me. We will figure out the professional aspects together like we figure out everything else." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face into something boyish and joyful. "Together. I like the sound of that." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, before the reality of the situation began to set in. Carter slowly released her, though he kept hold of her hand like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go completely. "We should probably talk about how this is going to work," Riley said, trying to shift back into practical mode even as her entire body thrummed with awareness of him. "The board, the employees, the media, I know," Carter said, "but can we have tonight? Just tonight where we do not have to think about any of that, where it can just be you and me." She squeezed his hand. "What did you have in mind? Dinner? A real date?" "I have wanted to take you to dinner for 3 years, but every time we went to a restaurant it was for work. I want to sit across from you and not discuss shipping routes or profit margins. I want to know everything about you that I do not already know." "You know a lot about me already," she pointed out. "I know your coffee order. I know you listen to jazz when you are working on complicated problems. I know you bite your lower lip when you are concentrating. But I do not know your favorite movie or what you wanted to be when you were a kid or if you prefer the mountains or the beach." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I want to know all of it." Warmth spread through Riley's chest, different from the heated awareness of the kiss but no less powerful. "The beach," she said softly. "I prefer the beach. My family went to the Oregon coast every summer when I was growing up, and some of my best memories are from those trips." Carter's smile widened. "See, I need to know these things." "So dinner, she agreed. An hour later, they were seated at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood far from downtown. Carter had changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a gray Henley that somehow made him look even more attractive than his usual boardroom attire. Riley had gone home to swap her work clothes for a simple black dress, and when Carter had picked her up at her apartment, the look in his eyes had made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "Tell me about your family," Carter said after they had ordered. He was leaning forward, his full attention on her in a way that was both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. "You have mentioned them a few times, but I want to know more." Riley took a sip of wine, organizing her thoughts. "My dad was a teacher, high school English. He passed away 5 years ago from a heart attack. My mom is a nurse, still working at the hospital in Portland where I grew up. I have 2 younger brothers. Ryan is a firefighter and Robert is finishing up his residency to become a pediatrician." They sound accomplished. They are. "Growing up, there was always this expectation that we would do something meaningful with our lives. Dad used to say that success was not about how much money you made, but about how much good you did in the world." She smiled at the memory. "He would have had some thoughts about me working for a shipping company. Would he have disapproved? No, I think he would have understood. Maritime shipping is the backbone of global commerce. The work we do connects people, brings resources to places that need them. That matters." She paused. "What about your family?" Something shuddered in Carter's expression, a wall going up that she recognized from business dealings with competitors or difficult clients. "Not much to tell. My father built the company from nothing, worked himself to death doing it. Literally, he had a stroke at his desk when I was 22. My mother remarried within a year and moved to France. We talk maybe twice a year." "I am sorry," Riley said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Carter looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her. "It made me who I am. For better or worse, I learned from my father that if you want something done right, you do it yourself, that your company is your legacy, the thing that will outlast you." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "But lately, I have been thinking that maybe he had it wrong. Maybe there are more important legacies than corporate empires. The conversation flowed easily after that, moving from childhood stories to college experiences to the random thoughts and preferences that made up a person's inner life. Riley learned that Carter had wanted to be an architect before his father's death forced him to take over the company. That he still sometimes sketched building designs late at night when he could not sleep. That his favorite movie was The Shawshank Redemption because it was about hope and perseverance. That he hated mushrooms but would eat them if they were in something rather than make a fuss. In turn, she told him about her disastrous attempt at learning guitar in college, her inexplicable fear of butterflies, her secret addiction to reality cooking shows. Things she had never told anyone at work, personal details that felt intimate and important in a way that surprised her. By the time they finished dinner, Riley felt like she was seeing Carter clearly for the first time, not just as her brilliant, driven boss, but as a complete person with dreams and fears and quirks that made him human. It made her feelings for him deepen into something richer than the attraction she had been fighting for years. They walked back to Carter's car slowly, their hands still linked. The Seattle night was cool and clear, the street lights casting golden pools on the sidewalk. When they reached the car, Carter turned to her instead of opening the door. "I do not want this night to end," he said. "It does not have to." The words were out before Riley could think better of them, but she did not take them back. She wanted more time with him, wanted to exist in this bubble where they were just Carter and Riley, not CEO and COO. "Come back to my place," he asked. "Just to talk more. I have a deck with a view of the Sound and I make a decent cup of coffee." She knew what she was agreeing to, knew that going to his house would change things irrevocably between them. But she had already made her choice the moment she kissed him in her office. "I would like that." Carter's house was in Magnolia, a neighborhood of stately homes overlooking Puget Sound. Riley had known he was wealthy. You did not build a billion-dollar company without accumulating significant personal wealth, but the reality of his home still took her breath away. It was modern and sprawling, all windows and clean lines, perched on a cliff with a view that seemed to stretch forever. "This is incredible," she said as he led her through the house to the deck he had mentioned. The space was furnished with comfortable outdoor furniture, and the view was even more spectacular than she had imagined. The lights of the city sparkled to the south, while the dark expanse of the water stretched to the west, moonlight dancing on the waves. "I bought it 3 years ago," Carter said, handing her a glass of wine. He had abandoned the coffee idea in favor of a bottle from what she suspected was an extensive collection. "Right after I hired you, actually. I needed a change, something that felt like mine rather than part of the company legacy." They settled onto a love seat, close enough that their thighs touched. The physical awareness between them had not dimmed, but there was a comfort to it now, a rightness that made Riley want to sink into the feeling. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment of companionable silence. "Anything? Why now? Why tonight? We have worked together for 3 years. What changed?" Carter set his wine glass down and turned to face her fully. "Last week, when we were in Singapore, you were negotiating with that supplier who kept trying to lowball us. Do you remember? Of course. He was convinced we would not walk away from the deal. You were magnificent. Calm, collected, absolutely unmovable on the terms we needed. And then, when he finally agreed, you smiled at him and shook his hand like you had been friends all along. Professional to the end." Carter reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I was standing there watching you, feeling so proud and so frustrated because I wanted to pull you into my arms and kiss you right there in that conference room. And I realized that I could not do it anymore. I could not keep pretending that what I felt for you was just professional admiration." Riley leaned into his touch. "I thought I was the only one feeling this way. You are always so controlled, so professional. I never saw any sign that you felt anything for me. I have spent 3 years perfecting that control." His voice was rough now, his eyes dark with emotion. "Every time you walked into my office, every time you leaned over my desk to show me something on your laptop, every time you laughed at something during a meeting, I had to remind myself of all the reasons why I could not act on what I was feeling. And now I do not care about those reasons anymore. Now I only care about this." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. Riley melted into him, her fingers threading through his hair as his arms came around her waist. They stayed on the deck for hours, talking and kissing and discovering each other. Carter told her about the pressure of taking over the company so young, the loneliness of being at the top with no one to share it with. Riley confessed her own struggles with imposter syndrome, the fear that she had not earned her position on merit but on luck. "You are the most competent person I have ever worked with," Carter said fiercely. "I have turned down offers to buy the company that would have made me obscenely wealthy because I could not imagine running it without you. You are not just my COO, Riley. You are my partner in every way that matters professionally, and I want you to be my partner in every other way too." The intensity of his words should have scared her, but instead they settled into her chest like coming home. When Carter finally drove her back to her apartment in the early hours of the morning, Riley felt like her entire world had shifted on its axis. Everything looked the same streets, the same buildings, but she was different. They were different. "We need to talk about work," she said as they sat in his car outside her building. "Monday," Carter agreed. "We will figure it out Monday. We will do everything properly, talk to HR and the board, make sure there are no conflicts of interest. But Riley, I need you to know that I am serious about this, about us. This is not some casual thing for me. It is not casual for me either." She kissed him softly. "I will see you Monday." The weekend passed in a blur of text messages and phone calls. They talked about logistics, about how to handle the revelation of their relationship, about their concerns and hopes. By Sunday evening, they had a plan. Monday morning, Riley arrived at the office early, her stomach a knot of nerves. She and Carter had agreed to meet with the head of HR first thing, to disclose their relationship and discuss any necessary changes to the company structure to avoid conflicts of interest. Jessica Torres, the head of HR, listened to their carefully prepared statement with a neutral expression. When they finished, she sat back in her chair and studied them both. "I am going to be honest with you," she said finally. "This is not ideal. The power dynamic between a CEO and a direct report is always going to raise concerns. However, I appreciate that you are being upfront about it rather than trying to hide it. We want to do this right," Riley said. "Whatever changes need to be made to my role or reporting structure, I am willing to discuss them." Jessica nodded slowly. "I think the best solution would be for Riley to report to the board rather than directly to Carter. Her role and responsibilities would not change, but it would create a buffer in terms of performance reviews, compensation decisions, and other areas where a personal relationship could create a conflict of interest." Carter and Riley exchanged glances. It was actually a better solution than either of them had anticipated. "That works for us," Carter said. Over the next few weeks, they navigated the complicated process of shifting from colleagues to partners. The board was surprisingly supportive once they understood the situation, and while there was some gossip among the employees, it died down quickly when it became clear that nothing about the way the company operated was going to change. If anything, Riley found that she worked better with Carter now that the tension between them had been resolved. They could focus on the business without the distraction of unspoken feelings, and their natural rapport and mutual respect made them an even more formidable team. But it was the personal relationship that truly transformed Riley's life. Carter was attentive and thoughtful, planning dates that ranged from elegant dinners to hiking trips in the Cascades. He remembered small details she mentioned in passing and surprised her with gestures that showed how much he was paying attention. When she mentioned missing her mom, he booked them both tickets to Portland for the weekend. When she had a rough day dealing with a difficult client, he showed up at her apartment with Thai food and her favorite ice cream. 3 months into their relationship, Carter invited her to a charity gala benefiting maritime education programs. It was a cause close to his heart, one of the few public events he actually enjoyed attending. Riley spent an hour getting ready, choosing a deep blue gown that made her feel elegant and confident. When Carter picked her up and saw her, he stopped dead in the doorway. "You are stunning," he said, his voice rough with emotion. The gala was held at a historic hotel downtown, and the ballroom was filled with Seattle's business elite. Riley had attended plenty of corporate events with Carter before, but this was different. Now, his hand rested on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. Now, he introduced her as his girlfriend rather than his COO. Now, when they danced, he held her close and whispered in her ear that he could not wait to take her home. "You are good at this," Riley said as they swayed together to a slow song. "The schmoozing, the networking, I always thought you hated these events." "I do, usually, but tonight is different." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Tonight I get to show off the woman I love." Riley's breath caught. They had not said those words yet, had been circling around them for weeks. Hearing them now in this moment made her eyes sting with happy tears. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have loved you for a long time." Carter kissed her, right there in the middle of the dance floor, and Riley stopped caring about who might be watching. All that mattered was this man and this moment and the future stretching out before them. As the months turned into a year, their relationship deepened into something solid and permanent. They moved in together, combining their lives in ways that felt natural and right. Riley's apartment was closer to the office, but they chose Carter's house for the view and the space, and she brought her personal touches that made it feel like theirs rather than his. They traveled together, mixing business trips with vacation days in exotic locations. They hosted dinners for their friends and family, blending their social circles. Riley's mother adored Carter, especially after he spent an entire afternoon helping her plant her garden when they visited Portland. Her brothers were more suspicious at first, protective of their sister, but Carter won them over with his genuine interest in their lives and his obvious devotion to Riley. The company continued to thrive under their leadership, expanding into new markets and earning industry recognition for innovation and ethical business practices. Riley was promoted to president and COO, a role that reflected her increasing responsibilities and the respect she had earned from the board and employees. Some people whispered that she only got the position because of her relationship with Carter, but those whispers faded when she proved herself again and again. On their 2-year anniversary, Carter took Riley back to the Italian restaurant where they had their first date. She knew something was different the moment they sat down. He had the same nervous energy he had that night in her office when he first told her how he felt. "You look like you are about to negotiate a hostile takeover," she teased, trying to ease his tension. "In a way, I suppose I am." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Riley, these past 2 years have been the happiest of my life. You have changed everything for me, not just how I see my work, but how I see the world. You have made me want to be a better man, to build a life that means more than just business success." Her heart started to pound as he slid off his chair and knelt beside the table. Around them, other diners began to notice, but Riley only had eyes for Carter. "I never expected to find what we have," he continued, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "When I asked you to give me a chance, I thought I was asking you to be my girlfriend. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was asking for so much more. I was asking for forever." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring that caught the light and sparkled like stars. "Riley Vaughn, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Riley's face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Carter slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms as the restaurant erupted in applause. He kissed her deeply, and Riley felt the last piece of her life click into place. They were married 6 months later in a ceremony on the beach in Oregon, at the same stretch of coastline where Riley had spent her childhood summers. It was intimate and perfect, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. Riley's mother cried through the entire ceremony, and her brother stood beside Carter as groomsman, a symbol of how fully he had been welcomed into the Vaughn family. "I love you," Carter said as they swayed together for their first dance as husband and wife, the ocean waves providing a soundtrack. "I loved you when you were just my brilliant COO, and I love you even more now as my wife. You are my partner, my best friend, my home." "I love you too," Riley whispered back. "Forever." A year after the wedding, Riley discovered she was pregnant. The news came as a surprise. They had talked about children but had not been actively trying. When she told Carter, showing him the positive pregnancy test over breakfast one Saturday morning, his face transformed with pure joy. "We are having a baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "We are having a baby." He pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Carter was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He insisted on accompanying her to every doctor's appointment, researched every book on parenting he could find, and converted one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery with an enthusiasm that made Riley fall in love with him all over again. Their daughter, Caroline Rose, was born on a sunny morning in May. When the nurse placed her in Riley's arms and Carter leaned over to get his first look at his daughter, Riley felt a completeness she had not known was possible. "She is perfect," Carter said, his finger tracing their daughter's tiny hand. "You are both perfect." The transition to parenthood was challenging, filled with sleepless nights and steep learning curves, but they navigated it together like they navigated everything else. Carter took paternity leave, much to the surprise of the business community, and devoted himself fully to helping Riley and caring for Caroline. When Riley was ready to return to work, they restructured their schedules to ensure that one of them was always available for their daughter. They hired a wonderful nanny named Margaret, but they were determined to be hands-on parents. Board meetings were scheduled around preschool pickups. Business trips were planned carefully to minimize time away from home. They made it work because they both believed their family was more important than any deal or contract. 3 years after Caroline was born, their son, Christopher James, joined the family. He was a complete surprise, arriving 3 weeks early during a particularly busy quarter, but his arrival brought even more joy into their already happy household. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, with Caroline playing in the yard and Christopher napping upstairs, Riley and Carter sat on the deck of their home, watching the sun set over the Sound. Carter's arm was around Riley's shoulders, and she was tucked against his side, exactly where she belonged. "Do you ever think about that night in your office?" Carter asked. "When I finally worked up the courage to tell you how I felt." "All the time," Riley admitted. "I think about how scared I was and how brave you were. I think about how my whole life changed in that moment." "I was terrified," Carter confessed. "I thought there was a good chance you would turn me down, maybe even quit, but I knew I had to ask. I could not spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." Riley turned to look at him, this man who had become her everything. "I am so glad you asked." "Me too." He kissed her temple. "You know, when I said I was asking you for forever, I did not fully understand what that meant. I thought it was about marriage, about building a life together. But it is so much more than that. It is every morning waking up next to you. It is watching you become an incredible mother. It is building a business and a family and a home that reflects everything we value. Forever is not just a promise, it is every day choosing each other, over and over again." Tears pricked Riley's eyes, happy tears that came so easily these days. "I choose you, Carter Nichols. Every single day I choose you. And I choose you, Riley Nichols. Always." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Riley reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From colleagues to lovers to partners in every sense of the word, they had built something beautiful and lasting. What had started with a simple question in her office, "Do you ever think about me?" had transformed into a love story that exceeded her wildest dreams. Caroline's laughter drifted up from the yard, and Riley felt Carter's smile against her hair. In a few minutes, they would need to call their daughter inside, start the evening routine of dinner and baths and bedtime stories. But for now, they sat together in the fading light, two people who had found in each other not just romance but a true partnership, a family, and a forever that would last all their days. The question Carter had asked her that night had indeed turned into forever, a forever filled with love, laughter, challenges overcome together, and a happiness that grew deeper with each passing year. Riley had never imagined when she took the job as COO that she would find not just a career but her soulmate. But that was exactly what had happened, and she would not change a single moment of their story. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Riley squeezed Carter's hand, and he squeezed back, a silent conversation that needed no words. They had everything they needed right here: each other, their children, and a love that had transformed a professional relationship into a beautiful, lasting marriage. The CEO, who had finally asked her to be his, had given her not just his heart but a life beyond her wildest dreams. And she knew with absolute certainty that their forever was only just beginning.